Hello and welcome to another episode of the BFG Podcast. Today it's an absolute pleasure to be sitting down with the CEO of Sky Stadium, Shane Harmon. Welcome to the show, Shane. It's a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you, Blake. Thank you for having me on.
So, start by telling the viewers how you got involved with Sky Stadium, how long you've been there, and just that sort of general outlook, please.
Sure. I think as most people that know me or those that are listening for the first time can probably tell from my accent that I'm not from around these here parts. Obviously Irish originally, and moved to Australia in the mid-90s for 1 year backpacking, and I think 27 years later, I'm still down under. I got into sport 20 years ago, actually more than 20 years ago. It's 22 years ago now, where I worked. My first job in sports was with the Sydney Swans in the AFL as membership and direct marketing manager. I was then head of marketing for the Rugby World Cup in 2003 in Australia, and then spent a bit of time as general manager marketing with Australian Rugby. The opportunity came up when my family were young to move over to New Zealand in 2008, where I took up the role as general manager marketing communications for the Rugby World Cup in 2011. That was absolutely a career highlight, and made many friends and look back on that whole experience very, very fondly. But after 4 years, we somewhat reluctantly head back to Sydney, and I was working as deputy CEO for the Asian Cup for 2015 football tournament, and seeing that through. And we thought we were back in Sydney for good, and I got a call about this role, and my first reaction was maybe no, because we'd done our 4 years and the kids were young. We were back in Sydney, but the more I looked at the opportunity, the more boxes it ticked for me professionally and personally. One, to step up into a CEO role. Two, to work on the facility or the venue space, because my career in events and sports had been on the event or team space previously. And then finally, we just loved the lifestyle in Wellington over the 4 years that we were here. So family moved back in 2013, and I've been in this role since. So I've been in it now 8.5 years. Lots of ups and downs over that period. Never a dull day. You come into work and you don't know what your day holds for you. And certainly the last couple of years have been very interesting, to say the least. But I'm optimistic of what lies ahead when we get through to the other side of this pandemic.
Yeah, we'll get into the last few years in a moment, but is the stadium CEO job something you see yourself doing for a bit longer yet, or moving on to a
Oh, look, it's not. I joke with friends in terms of when we moved back for this role, because our kids were school going age. My wife said, look, in coming back here, we're not going to move again until the kids are finished school. And I'm thinking, geez, that's 9.5 years. I mean, there's no way I'm going to be in a job for 9.5 years. Well, 8.5 years later, here we are. I'm still here. So no intentions of moving yet. But look, it's not going to be my job for life. There'll be other opportunities at some stage. But I've enjoyed the stability, and my kids. My youngest daughter is 1 year away from finished school. So once that's all done, who knows what the future holds? But no plans to change at this stage.
Right, and I'm sure we will. Now that we've made connections, I'm sure that we'll keep in touch with
Absolutely,
that.
Blake.
So who knows? Maybe I can help you on your next job.
I appreciate that, Blake.
Channel is by then. But anyway, going back to COVID. So COVID has been an interesting time for many businesses and stadiums and the like. So everyone's got their own story. So how's it been for you? I've asked a lot of recent interviews this, but how's your personal experience?
Look, it's been, like, I'd be lying to say it hasn't been challenging, and at times it's been quite stressful. when I look back over the last couple of years, we really had no idea what we were heading into 2 years ago when this initially hit. But I think the one thing that COVID has taught us is that we have to be very nimble and be ready for whatever is thrown our way. As I said, at times it has been quite stressful, but the one thing to keep coming back to is that this is outside of our control, and we've just got to deal with each challenge as it arises. It's nobody's fault. It's not of our making. And we've had to pivot very quickly on a number of occasions. We've had, you might remember, like earlier last year, we were like a few days out from holding the Black Caps versus Australia. We're expecting 20,000 on a Wednesday night, and suddenly we're an alert level change, and that was played behind closed doors, and we picked up 2 other games as a result of those games being closed doors around the country. But we take no pleasure in hosting games with closed doors, but at least we're doing our part to assist our hirers and our teams be able to get their content away and fulfill their broadcast obligations. We were absolutely gutted last year to lose both our test matches. We had a Bledisloe Cup and an Argentina test scheduled for August and September, I think it was, and that was pretty shattering as a result. It's terrible that our football team has been playing in Australia essentially for the last 2 years, and our women's football team will not have an opportunity to play a home game this year, but we really look forward to seeing them last year. But in the middle of all of this, there have been some absolute highlights. When I look back, that Phoenix game last year, I think we had 23,000. It was the largest ever crowd for a Phoenix game, home and away, in their history. It was the largest home and away crowd for the A-League. And, I look back in the 8.5 years, that particular event would be right up there in terms of one of my favorites. And a 3-0 victory, a magnificent atmosphere. And I remember watching that on TV the next day at home and thinking, look, that looks like a European football game. The 660 concert last year was an absolute highlight. That up to that point, that had been the biggest concert anywhere in the world in 12 months. And, I think the world looked at New Zealand somewhat with envy in terms of what we'd been able to achieve. That first test match that Bledisloe back in 2020 was first test match since the pandemic anywhere in the world. And that was fantastic as well. And the quick return to Super Rugby and the Super Rugby Aotearoa concept straight out of the pandemic in 2020 was extremely successful. But I think what time has shown was that was really just a placeholder until Super Rugby got back to some normality. And we're 2 years into it now and about to enter our 3rd year, and there's still a lot of uncertainty ahead. We hope to welcome the Hurricanes back in a few weeks. Obviously, the Super Rugby games are Super Rugby starting on the South Island, but I think it should be back hopefully sooner rather than later to venues. But we will be playing those games at the red setting, so it's going to be pretty small crowds. So I think the rest of this financial year through to the end of June is going to be very difficult. But if I look from the 1st of July, still optimistic on, and I've got a vested interest being a proud Irishman as well, and that Ireland are due down here in July to tour for 3 tests against the All Blacks, and we'll be very hopeful of landing one of those in Wellington. And I think the changes to the border settings and the isolation requirements should enable that to go ahead. The key thing will be what traffic light we're at, because it ain't going to be much fun for anybody if we're playing those games in front of very small pods of people with a red setting. So fingers crossed we get through this current phase of Omicron and we come out the other side stronger. We've got lots of inquiries for next summer and the next year for big events, concerts, major sporting events, and I'm confident if we can get through this particular period that next year could be one of our busiest years ever.
So much to unpack with it. I'm going to try and remember it all. So let's start where you started. So, and I'm going to try and remember it all. So I forget you have to help me because you unpacked so much there, and I can't write it down because I can't use my to write. So let's start with the you anticipating 20,000 and then the night before it all changes. But even with the change, you still got an iconic moment out of it. The big cheer
Yeah,
break.
yeah. Like there's a funny story behind that because it like with a closed door event, as the chief executive, I actually don't have a job because we minimize the number of people in the venue. We absolutely cut it down to the bone to make sure that we minimize the risk of close contacts and transmission. So it was essentially just one of our events and operations staff in terms of running the event, and one of our facilities people to make sure the facility was operating, and a few security. But I was sitting home watching the game, actually, which is a rare occasion for me, watching a game at Sky Stadium from my own home. I'm normally here, but the Glen Maxwell moment happened, and he sent that six over the fence, and sent the seat into oblivion. And I saw an opportunity. I tweeted, if we can get Glenn to autograph that, we would auction it for charity. And he was amazing. He did it without question. We raised a couple of grand for the Wellington Homeless Women's Trust, and he made, wasn't said at the time, he made a sizable personal contribution as well. So that was a very cool moment, and was just a little moment of light in an otherwise, dark period for events. And it was cool to be involved. And it's just one of those things that just happened at a moment in time. And sometimes with sport, because you can't script sport, you have to be ready to be nimble and quick when those moments do arise. And just a little lesson and a reminder to myself and everybody that when those moments do arise, make sure you seize them and promote them on social media, and make some good out of it.
And I'm just going to put a coarse language warning here for people watching, but when you saw that moment, were you like, oh shit, what do I, you know?
Yeah, it was funny. Like, I mean, Peter Simon, who's our facilities coordinator, I think one of our operations staff took a photograph of him, because I contacted the guys at the stadium and said, get the seat. So Pete went down and got the seat, and replaced it with a new seat. And one of our team took a photograph of Pete replacing the seat, and our marketing executive placed it on social media, and that was actually our most liked Instagram picture since we've had an Instagram account on social media for the stadium. So it was a cool story.
So you weren't like, my cheer.
Nah, nah, nah. I can tell you, Blake, that back in the good old days of the sevens, on any one day there would have been several hundred seats broken. So one broken seat is not a big deal, and we can replace them quickly.
How many spare chairs do you have ready to go at one time?
Oh, we've got several hundred. We don't need as many these days on standby, because the sevens is no longer in Wellington. But yeah, we've got several hundred, and we'll regularly, our facility staff will regularly do a lap at the venue, and because we haven't hosted events in a while, we'll do that again before we're back to normal with crowds. And invariably, you'll do a lap and you'll find a cracked seat or a splintered seat somewhere, and just replace it. But yeah, that's business as usual for us. That's not a big deal from a facilities management perspective.
And do you make sure that you've all got them all on order in case you need more as well? Is that
Yeah,
how
we always make sure we've got enough in stock here. So when we'll always keep a minimum level, and when we get down to that number, we'll place a new order.
Oh, that's good. So now going back to the you always being at the stadium. So with me getting into the media field, unfortunately, it's been a blessing. It's been unfortunate, and fortunately, it's been a blessing in disguise, because I wanted to go down a different path, but unfortunately, due to my um, disabilities, I couldn't get to do what I wanted to do. So this was the next best option, and it kind of been a blessing in disguise, because I've got to have connections with people, different organizations, and yourself and different people and try and grow my connection tree. And I'm quite often at the stadium, so I just wonder when I'll be looking. Will you be looking forward to seeing the fans there as much as I'm looking forward to going back? Because me and my family
Oh,
go there quite a lot,
yeah.
So
Look, that goes without saying, Blake, because it's been pretty tough on the team here. Like, I mean, when our business is events and we're not able to host events, you just sometimes question your sense of purpose, because we're here to create memorable occasions and deliver memorable events. And the thing that keeps us going is that, as I said to you earlier on, that the pipeline of events that is potentially coming down the track is really positive. Um, hopefully we get a Super Rugby game with crowds this year. We just don't know. Hopefully the Phoenix are back here in October, both the men's but also the women's team as well. Because I think when that women's team comes back here or plays here for the first time, I think it's going to be a massive event. And I think what they've had to do this year, and to see them win their first A-League women's game at the weekend, was amazing. And just to see the sheer joy of their faces as they come to the end of what's been a very tough season for them. And then, we got our hand up for test matches. It'll be a busy cricket summer next summer, and there will be a lot of major artists and acts coming to New Zealand next summer. There'll be so much concerts coming next summer if we get to that point and we can host crowds and get concerts in, that there's going to be plenty of concerts for every stadium in New Zealand to go around.
So I don't know what it's going to be like for me, because it's the first time I've done it from a different perspective. So not only will I be going as a ticket buyer with my family, there will be some opportunities there where I might be able to be in the media field. So it's going to be a different feeling walking back into the stadium in that regard for me.
Yeah. But I remember after the after we had the first lockdown and we were out for about 3 months, and then we held that the first Super Rugby game we had back here was the Crusaders, and it was unlike any atmosphere I remember, because there was an enormous sense of pride, I think, amongst Kiwis about what we had been able to achieve as a stadium of 5 million, and what we were doing in terms of attending a sporting event, 20,000 people, was unique around the world at that particular point. I think it'll be different this time around, because we are, in some respects, we've always maintained that policy of public health first, and minimizing transmission, and now as Omicron spreads, the rest of the world has probably got on with it in many respects, and it's quite the boots on the other foot in some respects now when I look around the world. And I don't know if you watched the Super Bowl the other day, but full stadiums, while in many respects the pandemic's still raging in those countries. So hopefully with the vaccination rates we've achieved, with moving through Omicron now, that we come out of this on the other side reasonably quickly, and that the hard work that we've done as Kiwis over the last 2 years does achieve those public health objectives, and that we're able to get back to some sense of normality sooner rather than later, because it does feel different at the moment. Like out there at Red, much higher cases than during the first lockdown, but people are still going to cafes and restaurants and bars, and it's a very different feel this time around, except at stadiums, because we can't host crowds. So until we get out of Red, there's not much that we can promise in terms of fans, with the exception of a small number of fans that will be able to get in for Super Rugby perhaps, but that's going to be confined to season ticket holders and stadium members, etc. In small pods of 100. Not all of them are going to be able to get in for every game, so it'll be some ballot system, I imagine. But where I've set my next, I'd love to see a Super Rugby game with crowds this year. Will it happen? I don't know, because we have no indication as to when we're going to get out of Red. Like, for example, we've got 3 games of Super Rugby in the first 3 weeks of March. I don't see any environment currently where that's not at Red. What is it like in April? I don't know. What is it like in May when the Australian teams are due to come over here? Will they be able to get in? 7 days isolation doesn't really work for kind of week-to-week trans-Tasman sport, but we don't know. And all we can be as a venue is ready. So my next the next kind of big events that I'm focused on that I really want crowds at is the Irish test against the All Blacks in July, and obviously I'll be working during the test if we secure one here. But I may travel to one of the other venues and enjoy it as a punter if we get that opportunity. But fingers crossed that comes our way soon.
I'm trying to see if I can find an opportunity to get there. But anyway, if you get it, anyway. So you talked about having 660. So at the time of this recording, it was just released a short time ago that you've had to postpone the second round of having 660. So how has that been for you working through that? Just like anything else you've had to work through the past year and a half.
Yeah, I mean we're in our financial year runs from the 1st of July to the 30th of June. So while we're at the end of the second year of COVID, or about to start the third year, we're into our third financial year of COVID, and this one has been the most difficult because where New Zealand was sitting a year ago, and we were sitting in a very good place. Like we forecast a relative return to normal for this financial year, but as each month went by, it all began to fall away each month. So we started in August with losing both the test matches. We then lost Guns N' Roses. We knew the Phoenix were gone for at least the first half of the season. Then as time moved on, we realized the Phoenix probably unlikely they were coming back. The Australia-New Zealand cricket games were announced that they weren't happening. A number of exhibitions, Nitro Circus was postponed to December. And then over the last 2 weeks, we've been speaking with the promoter regarding 660. And, as time was going on, I mean, that looked increasingly unlikely. And, our concert was at the end of March, but there were several before then. I think the first one was at the beginning of March, and it was a 6-stadium tour. So look, it felt inevitable. I don't think there was any surprise in that announcement. I think the band had been hoping to showcase some new music during those shows, but hopefully what will happen between now and then is that they might get the new album out, who knows, and those songs are on the tips of everybody's tongues by the time the band does play. So they're rescheduled to the end of October. Guns N' Roses have been rescheduled to, I think, the 8th of December. And, hopefully in the next couple of months, we'll be making more announcements on more concerts for that summer as well. If we continue to get positive news on borders and going back to at least an orange setting.
If you ever want to make an exclusive announcement here, we will do our best to get the video turned around quickly for that. If you ever want help, that happy to
who would you
accommodate with that.
Blake, who would you like to see play at the stadium?
I'm more of a sports guy.
More of a what?
Sports.
Okay,
guy.
Yeah, cool, yeah.
But I do like music, like Ed Sheeran and all those kind of things. Yeah. So we'll see what happens.
Okay. Cool.
So next topic is Cricket World Cup, the women's one about to start. You're heavily involved in that, I understand.
Yes. So I'm on the board of the local organising committee. So that's I take my stadium hat off for that one. And it's been relatively easy for me to manage because we don't actually have games at Sky Stadium. So I've not had to deal with any potential conflicts. But obviously the games are going to be played at the Basin. Um, that's been an extremely challenging event in this current time, as you can imagine. But the good news is that all the teams are in the country, which was a significant step in the delivery of the tournament.
Yes.
The reduction in isolation times means that those teams are now going to be able to get out and train much earlier than had been originally anticipated. So that's fantastic news. And the only sour note, of course, is that we're not going to have capacity crowds at that event. You know, it starts in just over a month's time. Who knows? By maybe through April, we could change alert levels and we can then pivot to crowds, but it will be the same as any events that we've been running at our stadium here.
Yeah.
It'll be pods of 100. So they're going to be relatively limited capacities, but it's going to be a fantastic event. You know, the big focus from the ICC and the local organising committee has been that, you know, the women will get the same experience as the men did in 2015 for the Cricket World Cup. Our team at the stadium also prepare the pitch at the Basin. So they move between both venues. So spoke to Hagan, our turf manager, this morning, and that preparation is coming on well at the Basin. And I think I think New Zealand cricket have done a terrific job over the last couple of years in elevating women's cricket. And you know, you look at that White Ferns teams; they're all household names now. You know, I think they're going to get a lot of support during this tournament, and you know, those that lucky enough to get into the grounds to see the games, but certainly those following on Sky Sports will be getting behind the White Ferns. And yeah, it's just the only regret, of course, in all of this will be that we wish we had more people in those venues. But I think it's going to be a magnificent event.
I'm going to start doing a bit of quick fire so I don't take up too much of your time, so that I can get through everything. So how disappointing was it not to get any games at the Guy Stadium itself of the World Cup, regardless of the fact that if you had crowds or not? Do you hope that the Omicron does decrease quite quickly, like it has in other countries, like peak quite quickly and then decrease really quickly, so we can get crowds back quickly? And are you looking forward to the Women's World Cup in 2023 for the football?
Yes. So look, the answer to all of those is yes. But look, at the end of the day, we're not public health practitioners, so we will take our guidance from government and the Ministry of Health. I'm not going to sit down here, jump up and down, and say we need crowds back as soon as possible. I'm not qualified to make that decision. We will take our guidance from government and be ready when they're ready. But being someone who's worked in events for over 20 years and the team here at the stadium, you know, it is pretty crushing not to be able to have people in your venue and to see happy, smiling faces enjoying sport. So I want to get through this as quickly as possible. You know, I've got my eyes set on those Irish tests in July as kind of my next benchmark in terms of, fingers crossed, back to normal. Regarding the FIFA World Cup, you know, while we haven't been managing or running any events in the recent past here at the stadium, our team here at the stadium, particularly our operations team, are heavily involved in the planning for that event. That is going to be of a scale of an event that we probably haven't seen in New Zealand. And I worked on the Rugby World Cup in 2011, but the requirements for this event are above that. So I think that's going to be a massive event when it does come around. I think we're scheduled for 8 games at the stadium. So when that kicks off, I think we're holding a game almost every second day at Sky Stadium. So it's going to be an enormous event. I particularly am looking forward to it. It's going to be a big undertaking for the stadium, and it's going to be as big an event as we've ever held at the stadium. So bring it on.
So I was talking to Justin Nelson, who is a regular on this podcast. He comes on from time to time, and who gives us updates about the program that's coming up on Sky Sports. And he was saying how delightful it has been to have such a brand of partners that have worked together through this process. Do you sort of feel the same way? Are you impressed by how everyone has come together and all of that kind of thing? And how was it a few years ago? Because I forgot that one earlier, going through the transition from the Westpac era to the Sky Stadium era.
Yeah. So to answer the first question, when we went into the pandemic, because you've got so many different commercial relationships, you've got contracts in place with hirers, with your sponsors, with your stadium members, with your corporate box licenses, with signage partners, with caterers, with cleaners, and inevitably, you look at the agreements and say, well, look, what's the situation here, and how do we manage these agreements now into this period of uncertainty? Because we didn't know whether we were going to be out for 1, 3, 12, 18 months at that stage. And yeah, you certainly, from a legal perspective, you want to be across the contractual situation. But in most cases, we just put the contracts aside and say, well, look, what's the right thing to do here? Because we all need each other on the other side. And we all need each other to get through this. So we took a very much a partnership approach to everything. We delivered value back to our sponsors and members and boxes, and because we weren't able to host events, we weren't obliged to contractually, but we felt it was the right thing to do. So critically important having strong relationships, having strong partners, because the comforting thing through all of this is when I speak to David Dome at the Phoenix, or Avonlea at the Hurricanes, or David White at New Zealand Cricket, or Justin at Sky, or whatever, everybody's in the same boat, and we've all been feeling the same pain over the period. And while they're partners and we have contractual relationships with them, they're also my friends as well, and we're able to lean on each other and cry on each other's shoulder if required, and compare war wounds and how we're going through this period. So those relationships have been invaluable. The transition from Westpac to Sky was quite smooth, actually. Taking down all the Westpac signage after 20 years and putting in the new branding gave the stadium a refresh. We took the opportunity, because we were rebranding all the signage, to bring in bilingual signage at the stadium and have Te Reo Māori across all of our wayfinding and signage throughout the stadium. So when you come up with that Fran Wild walk, all of that signage now is bilingual. So we're quite proud of what we've been able to do there. And then last year with our announcements in the venue and coming up the Fran Wild walk, again, that's all bilingual as well. So that was an early change that we made. And then we did some cool things with Sky last year. We were able to deliver the Sky broadcast, the audio of the broadcast via the stadium app on the stadium Wi-Fi within the stadium, and we were able to get the lag down to about half a second to 1 second. And we had been working how do we reduce that further, because I know one of the issues from an accessibility perspective is that when patrons with accessibility issues might have been listening to for example, patrons who are sight impaired, they'd sometimes bring a transistor radio in, which would give them live audio. But if it wasn't available on one of the main radio stations and was switched to digital, that if they're listening to a digital radio, it can be 10, 20 seconds behind what's actually happening on the field. So that was one of the reasons that we looked at that as well, is that this help from an accessibility perspective as well. So that's something cool we did with Sky last year. But they've been great. Justin's obviously working with Sky now, and I speak to Justin regularly, and like them, we're just keen to see people back in a venue, because I think it really goes to show that you can still run sport behind closed doors and deliver your broadcast contract and fulfill your broadcast obligations and contractual obligations, and you can sit at home watching it on TV. But the TV product, it's nowhere near as exciting than having fans in the stadium. as the backdrop. So we all want fans back sooner rather than later.
And I mean, for me, sitting in my wheelchair, it's been quite nice, having those, although they've been there for a number of years now, those platforms where you can sit under a bit of a sheltered area. So
yeah, and I mean, we're always looking at ways and how we can improve from an accessibility standard. We are gold rated from B Lab in terms of accessibility, but there are still further improvements that we can make in the venue. And when we get back into doing events, one of the things we do want to do is establish maybe 6 monthly consultation groups with our community who have accessibility issues, so that they can feed into that process. So if that opportunity presents itself, Blake, I'd love to extend an invitation to you to come along, but we'll wait till we get back to events and we can have more face-to-face meetings before we kick that off.
As we close here, is there any messages you would like to give to the people who might watch this, or because it might be, I don't know how quick the turnaround will be, so it may be within a few days, it might be within a few weeks at the time of recording this. So, are there any messages?
My only message is that, while it's a bit doom and gloom at the moment for sports and crowds, that I'm very, very optimistic about what lies ahead. And, we need our borders open to run our business, really. When you consider A-League, Super Rugby, NRL, international football, international cricket, international rugby, concerts, they all require open borders. And, that has, while alert levels has created one set of challenges, it's the borders that's probably created the biggest challenge. So I think with the changes in borders in recent weeks, I think that's going to start moving, and it just gives me optimism looking ahead to the next financial year, through to the summer and concerts, and then through to the FIFA World Cup. That I'm more optimistic than I was probably a while ago in terms of what the future looks like, and we'll all get just through this together and hopefully have fans back at the stadium sooner rather than later.
Well, with that, I will say thank you for coming on the show, Shane. It's been a pleasure to have you. And to the viewers, don't forget to like and subscribe to this video, and we will see you on the next one.
Thank you, Blake.